How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we Daf Kuf Daled, Daf 104 of Masechta BavaMetzia. All right, friends. All right, another two Mishnayos today. The first one is not very difficult. The second one, I don't know if it's difficult or not. At the end of, it's not easy. But at the end of the second Mishnah, we get to Iska, a little blast from the past from Ezu and Neshech. So that's going to come up a shtickle. All right, let's do it. Says the Mishnah on Daf Kuf Gimel Amud Beis, about 5 lines from the bottom. Hamakabel Soda Mechavero. All right, so if Ruvain either sharecrops or rents a field from, if Reuven, either sharecrops or rents a field from Shimon, vi beis ashlochin, and it is a field that is a dry field. It doesn't get enough rainwater to provide its irrigation needs, and it needs help from supplemental irrigation from a stream, and there is just so happens to be a stream that runs through the field. Okay? Obeso Elon. Or it's a field that has a tree on it. And that is sort of a feature of the field, that there is a fruit tree that just produces fruits without really any effort on the half of Reuven. So these are like assets that the field has. It has a stream, or it has a tree on it, a fruit tree. So again, Makabel Soda Mechaveru, so Reuven is Makabel Soda from Shimon, Vi Beis Ashlochin, and it's this field that has a stream in it, or Beis Elon, or a field that has a fruit tree on it. Yovish Hamayin V'Niktzos Sa'ilon, but what if that asset, what if that feature goes away? What if the stream dries up? What if the tree, right, George Washington comes to town and he chops down the tree? So now the feature is gone. That's a bummer for Reuven. Eino menakalo min chachoro. Shimon has no obligation to renegotiate the contract with Reuven now that this asset is gone. Im Amarlo, however, if at the time of the agreement, Reuven says to Shimon, Chachrli sode beis hashlochin zo. Rent to me this beis hashlochin, this field that has this stream, or sdei beis ha'ilon, or this field that has this geshmaka tree. Zeh yovish hamayin v'niktzot ha'ilon. Well, in that case, if the stream dries up, or the fruit tree, George Washington comes to town and chops down the tree, menakelo min chachoro. So then you would. So in that case, the Gemara is going to talk about this, but Reuven made it clear that this is something that he cares about, and then if that asset is it goes away, so then Reuven needs to. So then they can renegotiate the contract, and Reuven can ask for a lower price. Heichi dami. What's pshat with this stream that dries up? If we're talking about Mamash, Gezunta River, a big river that dries up, well, that is right. Amai eno menakalo min chachor. Why would they not renegotiate the deal? Neimale, let Reuven say to Shimon, Makas Medinai. This was kind of like an unpredictable thing. Reuven says, look, I'm not responsible for this thing. Right, as the Mishnah says, and if it's like some kind of act of God, so then Reuven does it. It's not anything that he sort of did, and it was completely unexpected, and therefore Reuven could say, hey, this unexpected thing happened, I want to kind of renegotiate our responsibilities to each other. So again, let Reuven say to Shimon, hey, this was a Makas Medina, I shouldn't be responsible to give you that same sort of agreed upon amount. That's what Reuven says to Shimon. Amar Papa says, Papa the Yavish Nara Zuta. Okay, well, it's talking about where the stream that dried up was a streamala, a little stream. The Amar Lei that Shimon says to Reuven, Iboylach Lasui Bedavla, get a bucket and just bring water from the little stream. Just there was a little stream on the thing, it dried up. Shimon says to Reuven, all right, get a bucket and find some water and irrigate the field that way. Amar Papa says, Papa. Okay, so listen to this. Amar Papa says, Papa Hani Tarte Masnisa Kamaisa. So the first two Mishnayos that we've learned so far about, the place where the minig is to harvest, so you harvest, to uproot, and this one that talks about the Beis Hashlochen and the Beis Ha'ilon, Beis Hashlochen, Beis Ha'ilon. So these two Mishnayos, Mishkachas lo bein bechachranusa bein bekablanusa. These two Mishnayos are relevant whether you are sharecropping, whether you are leasing. Mikan ve'elach de isa bekablanusa leisa bechachranusa de isa bechachranusa leisa bekablanusa. The Mishnayos that are coming up, right? The first one of them being already in a few lines from now, about 50 lines from now. Those are coming. The upcoming Mishnayos are going to be unique either to a sharecropper or to a renter. Okay, so again, Mikam Elach, the upcoming Mishnayos, Disa b'kablanusa, Leisa b'chachranusa, Disa b'chachranusa, Leisa b'kablanusa. It's either for kablanus or for chachranus. Omar, im Omar lo chachar li sdebes ashlochin zev v'chulei. But if Reuven had said to Shimon at the time that they were making the agreement, he says, I want this base hashlochin, well then, if the stream dries up, they can renegotiate and Reuven can ask for a price adjustment since the asset that he really valued is now gone. Va'amai, why should they be able to why should Reuven be entitled to renegotiate? Le'malei, let Shimon say to Reuven, Shma ba'alma amri loch. That when I said a base ashlochin, I was just saying that it's a base ashlochin by name. But it doesn't guarantee that there's actually a stream on it. Milotani, because after all, do we not learn in the Brisa? If Shimon says to Reuven, base core offer ani mochelach, I'm giving you a base core of 30 sa'ah of dirt. All right, I'm selling to you. Even though there's only half that amount, higio, it's considered acceptable. Shlo mocherlo elo shma v'udimisker base core. That when Shimon says, I'm selling you a base core of a base core, it's just called a base core. It doesn't actually have to have a base core. As long as what he sold is actually called a base core. Let's go shtickle weiter. It's going to make sense. If Shimon says to Reuven, I think it's going to make sense. To me it makes sense. I hope it makes sense to you. He says, I'm selling you a vineyard. Hey, how about this? Perfect example. Martha's Vineyard. Is there actually a vineyard in Martha's Vineyard? I have no clue. But that's not the point. Like, is there a vineyard in Martha's Vineyard? I really don't know. But it's still called Martha's Vineyard. So like if somebody shows up, it's like, wait, where's the vineyard? It's like, no, there isn't actually a vineyard here. Right? It's like, even if there is a vineyard in Martha's Vineyard, I don't know, but there are like places like that, right? That it's like called something, but like there isn't actually that thing there. It's just kind of called it, right? So that's kind of what it's saying. Like, it's called a base core. That doesn't literally mean that there's actually going to be 30 sa of the thing. It's called a base core, right? Or if Shimon says, okay, I'm going to sell you my vineyard, right? Or like, let's say there's there was a vineyard in the family, right? And it's like, you can imagine like your family, maybe like, your grandfather owned like a farm or something like that. And like now it's not actually functional, but you still own the real estate. And, you go there, like the family goes there maybe one, in the summers or something. We're going to the farm. There isn't actually a farm. There's no plants, but we're going to the farm. I'm selling you a farm. We're not actually selling you plants or anything. I'm selling you a farm. So this is kind of like what is the idea over here, right? So base course. So karma ani mochelach, right? I'm selling you a vineyard. Even though there are no actual grape vines, higio, it's still considered that's considered acceptable. Shalomachalo ela shma. What he's selling him is the name. He's not selling him the actual grapevines. He's selling him a vineyard. So, as long as what he's selling him is actually called a vineyard. Pardes, I'm selling you an orchard. I'm selling you an orchard. Even though the orchard doesn't actually have pomegranates, it's still considered acceptable. He's selling him the name, right? It's called an orchard. As long as people actually refer to this place as an orchard, regardless of if they're actually pomegranates. So we see that Shimon can say to Reuven, look, I didn't actually mean that there's literally like grapevines in the vineyard. I'm selling you a vineyard. It's called a vineyard, but there may or may not actually be grapevines. So let him say the same thing over here. Namely, that Shimon said to Reuven, Shma ba'alma amilach, right? So Reuven says, hey, the stream dried up. Let Shimon say to him, like, okay, but I know there was a stream there, but when it was called the Beis HaShlachim, it's called the Beis HaShlachim regardless of if there's actually a stream on it. So Shmuel says, Shmuel Lokasha, it's no problem. Hada Omar le machkir lechocher, hada Omar le chocher le machkir. It depends who's saying it. If it's Shimon saying it to Reuven, then yeah, you might just be referring to like the name. It's called a vineyard or an orchard, even if it's not. Doesn't actually have grapevines or pomegranate trees. And in this case, if Shimon were to say to Reuven, I'm selling you a Beis HaShlachim, yeah, there may or may not be a stream on it. But if Reuven says to Shimon, like, hey, I want to buy this, I want to rent this field with the stream, well, that's then that's different. And Reuven is giving importance to that stream, and if it dries up, then he has the right to renegotiate. Alright, so Omer le machkir lechocher, if Shimon says to Reuven, Shma ba'alma, so then Omer le, so then that's just the name. But Omer le chocher le machkir, but if Reuven says to Shimon, so kpeda, it means that he's actually, cares about it. It's important to him. Ravina Omer says, Ravina idi v'idi da Omer le machkir lechocher. No, actually in both scenarios we're talking about where Shimon's saying to Reuven, Omer zeh, but because we're saying this, right? Because what does it say in the Mishnah? He says, "Imam chakor li sode beis ashlochin zo," right? This one. So mechlav dekoi begava askinan, which means that Mamela they're already in the field. That's why he's saying this one, the one that we're in right now. So beis ashlochin lamale. Why does he then have to say beis ashlochin if they're already in the field? They know what they're talking about. They're there. So lamale the memer de ka'amar le. Wait, what? Because what he's saying, therefore, is that a Beis HaShlachin, like this Beis HaShlachin that has the stream in it, so that means that they're being specific, and the stream is like an important part of what they're talking about. So then, if it dries up, then Reuven can renegotiate. Says the Mishnah Makabel Soda Michavero Ve'oviro. So if Reuven is so this is that okay. So remember we had just said that the Papa had said that up until now the two Mishnayos could be either by Chachirus or by Kablonus. But from now on it's going to specifically be referring to one or the other. So this is specifically by Kablonus. This is specifically by sharecropping. Right? How come? Because the Makabel Sodom Chaveru is saying that if Reuven is sharecropping a field from Shimon Ve'ovira, and he didn't end up working the field. So now by Chachirus, by rental, who cares? He still pay up, right? Meaning they agreed in advance how much he has to pay him for the field. Do whatever you want. Do something, don't do something. You still pay me. But sharecropping is percentage based. So percentage of 0% is right. So percent, 50% of zero crops is zero. So therefore, so in this scenario, so Shaman also kamiru uya la'asos. So we evaluate how much the field is potentially should produce. V'nosein lo, and then Reuven is obligated to give a percentage based on the expected amount, the projected amount. So if they were doing like a 50-50 split, then he didn't work the field, he slacked off, so then they project how much it should have produced, and then 50% of that is what Reuven owes Shimon. He gives it to him. Because this is what Reuven writes in the document that they make. That if I leave it fallow and I don't work the land, ashalim b'meitva, I will pay you. I will pay you the good stuff. I'll pay you what it's worth with good quality stuff. Now says the Gemara, Reb Meir ayodorish lashon hedjit. So Reb Meir would be dorish lashon hedjit, meaning if you have a document and there's like stuff written in the document that isn't like official rabbinically templated documents, but you just add your own kind of stuff to the document. So we're going to see a bunch of opinions right now where they would be dorish lashon hedjit, where you look at the shtar, you see what's written, whatever's written there is what we do. Even if this is just kind of off the cuff kind of stuff that they added to the document, that's what we do. The Tanis will learn the Brayso. Meir Omer says to Meir, Im Ovi v'lo Avid, that if Reuven says, look, if I leave the field fallow and I don't work it, Ashalim b'meitva, I will still, I will pay you a percentage based on the projected amounts. So that isn't like official rabbinically templated stuff, but that's just his commitment that he made, and therefore he has to stick with it. Rabbi Yehuda ayodorish lashon hedjit. Rabbi Yehuda would also be dorish lashon hedjit. The Tanya is willing to advise Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Adam maybe korban osher al ishto. So if you have a wealthy fellow and he has a wife, and his wife needs to bring a korban osham, korban chatos, mitzora, yoledis, whatever it might be. So if he's a wealthy fellow, he has to bring a korban befitting of a wealthy fellow. He can't say, well, she's not wealthy. No, he has to bring a korban befitting for a wealthy fellow. And this would apply to any korban that she has an obligation to bring. So he has to provide the korban of an expensive, befitting korban, and I believe that this would not include like a nidava, a voluntary korban, but things that she has a chiyuv to bring, like a yoledis or a mitzora. Shekach kosev la, and the reason is because this is what he writes to her. So now Rashi has like this different girsa. So I'll go based on that, although he kind of like reads it differently. So I'll kind of do some like in between kind of thing, which is like based on the explanation of Rashi, but not like change around the words like he does, I think. This is what but I guess that this is technically what she writes to him. Yeah, so the way that Rashi kind of explains it, Amar B'Yehuda lefichach in patra in a chayvin shkach he koseves lo, exactly. Achroin deis li olach min kadmas denom. Alright, so I'm going to kind of do like a messed up reading, which is basically explaining it like Rashi, but kind of somehow like reading some of the words like Rashi reads them. Yeah. This is what he writes to her. So like, according to Rashi, it's really what she writes to him. The achrayis that you had on me from before. Okay, get it? Anyways, yeah, the way that Rashi learns it is basically like if they get divorced, so then he pays her ksuba, right? And then she writes him a receipt, like, yeah, okay, cool, like I received the ksuba. And then what she writes there is that kol achrayis the islich olai, that any responsibilities that you had to me vis-a-vis korbanos, if there were any outstanding korbanos that I had to offer, right? So you don't, right? You're off the hook, right? You paid me my ksuba. Here's your receipt. You don't have to pay for anything anymore. And any korbanos from earlier, you're not responsible for anymore. So I think the point is that the implication is that up until that point, he would have an obligation to bring these korbanos, and if he's a wealthy guy, he would have to bring a expensive korban. All right. Hillel Azakin oyedorish loshin edgit. Hillel Azakin oichit would be dorish loshin edgit. The Tanya is willing to buy. Anche Alexandria hoyimikachinis neshosei. So the people in Alexandria, they would be mekadesh their wives. Uvshas knisasin lechuppah, but when they would go to the chuppah, to the canopy, How inconsiderate. Other people would come and take the wife away. That's annoying. So basically you'd have a guy, right? A guy would be Mekadesh, a fellow would be Mekadesh a fella. And then finally a year later it would come to the chuppah and somebody would just take her away. How annoying is that? Come to the wedding, you bring your Gemara, you're trying to learn. It turns out that somebody takes away the wife. They got to reschedule the wedding. You got to come back another time. What a shmendrik. So the chuppah boy nacherim v'chotvim osam. So then the people would come and just take her away. I'm going to a wedding on Thursday. I hope they don't do that. Oh my gosh! Imagine they did that on Thursday. Maybe on Thursday I'll call somebody who's there and I'll confirm that nobody took her away. That's a good idea. I think I probably have to get there late anyways. Well, have to. Probably going to get there late. So maybe I'll just call somebody who's there. I'll be like, yo, did they she's still there, right? That's a good idea. Okay, that's a good idea. All right, I'll do that. All right, that's settled. So then people will come and take her away. Fine. So then the Chacham wanted to make the kids mamzerim because I mean it was a meorah, right? You had a baby with a betrothed woman, like that. That's an Eishasish. So Amar Loin Hillel Azakin. So Azakin said to the people, "Haviu li ksubas imchem, bring me your mother's ksubas." Haviu lo ksubas iman. So they brought him their mother's ksubas. Umatza shekasu boyed, and he saw what was written in the ksubas. Lichshetikonsi lechupa havadili into that in the ksuba, what it says is when you will go under the chuppah, at that point you will be betrothed to me, right? Which means that at the time of the kedushin they weren't actually betrothed. They only actually get betrothed under the chuppah, which means that when the women got snatched away, they weren't actually married yet, and therefore the children are not mamzerim v'losu b'nei mamzerim, so the children were not made into mamzerim. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Omer. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha yidorish lashon ejit. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha oichet would be dorish lashon ejit. The Tana is willing to Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Omer. It says Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, Hamaves chavero v'lo yimashkinenu. Where am I? What? Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Omer, Hamaves chavero lo yimashkinenu yosem echovo. Aha. So if Shimon lends money to Ruvain and he takes a collateral, and so that collateral should not be worth more than the actual loan. So if the loan's for $1,000, you should not take a collateral that's $1,500. Shekach kosev lo. Because in the event that he gives back the collateral, for like a longer period of time, so shekach kosev lo, so then Ruvain, when taking back the collateral, would write to Shimon, tashlumta de islach olai kol kovel dichi, that this payment that I owe you, I will pay you this kind of value of this collateral in its entirety. Now, the thing is that if the collateral was worth more than $1,000, then he'd be getting repaid more than he actually lent, which is a problem. So therefore, the collateral, which I guess we're being dorish lashon hejid, right? We're saying that if Shimon returns the collateral for an extended period of time, so Reuven writes to him that I'll pay you back the full value of the collateral. Well, the fact, right? So we're saying if the collateral is more expensive than the loan, well then that would be a problem. So interest issues. So then we're saying that from the fact that this is what Reuven writes, so we're being dorish lashon hejid. Time the cost of hochi. So what? The reason why Shimon is entitled to collect from this returned collateral is only because Reuven wrote him this statement. Ha'i lo kasav le hochi. But if Reuven would not have written this statement to Shimon lo kanya, then Shimon would not have been kona the collateral to be able to get repaid from it. Let's go weiter. Rabbi Yochanan says, Mashkin ve'eshiv lo amashkin. So if Shimon accepted a collateral from Reuven, but then he returned the collateral to Reuven, umeis, and then Reuven dies, shomto me'al gabe banav, he could take it back from his children, meaning, normally a loan is not repayable from metaltlin, right? Normally if Reuven had taken out a loan from Shimon, and then Reuven dies, Shimon cannot collect the loan from metaltlin, he can collect it from nechasim mishubadim, but not from metaltlin. But in this case, Rabbi Yochanan is saying that he can collect it from metaltlin, this particular mashkin, because he made a kinyan on it when he accepted it. So we see that regardless of if Reuven writes this document of you can collect from this mashkon, Shimon is kona it anyways. So ahani ksuba legeron, ksiva legeron. But the document, what it helps is that if the item goes down in value, decreases in value, Shimon would still be able to collect at that price of the writing. Okay. Finally, Rabbi Yossi Yidarish Lashon Edget. Rabbi Yossi Oichip Yidarish Lashon Edget. The Tanya is within the verse of Rabbi Yossi Omer. Malcolm Shinagu Lasos Ksube Milve. Oh, this is like a weird thing. Is this? No. Okay. Rabbi Yossi Omer says, Rabbi Yossi, Malcolm Shinagu Lasos Ksube Milve. In places where the minig was, I don't know, if I understand this correctly, I mean, I assume that I understand it relatively correctly, at least. Whatever amount of money was written in the ksuba, that is what she would be bringing into the marriage and what he would have to pay in the case of divorce. So whatever they wrote in the document, that was the actual price. But the thing is, in some places the minigs they would write twice the amount. How confusing, because they wanted to be all dramatic and stuff. I guess it was nice. It was theatrical. At the wedding, it's wow, oh my gosh, look, the ksuba is so expensive. Oh wow, look at that. It was all very fun and everything. But they weren't actually going to pay those expensive prices. It was understood that the actual amount being committed is actually half the amount. But they wanted to make a whole COVID and this, that. Ooh, wow, look at all this money being put into the ksuba. But the truth is, it was really half that amount. Why? It just makes things confusing. Anyways, so B'Yossi Omer says to B'Yossi, Makom Shnagu Lasos Ksuba Milve Gova Milve. So if the amount of the ksuba was just a loan, was just the actual amount, so then, oh, did I not? Wait, one second. So if it was just the actual amount, so then okay, they would just deal with the actual amount. That's the actual amount she would bring into the marriage. That's the actual amount that he would have to pay her in the case of divorce. But if we're talking about doubling the amount, BavaMetzia, so the husband collects from the father-in-law, initially half the amount, and then he has to pay back half the amount. All right. Now, the Narblayans, they would triple it. Wow. So at the wedding, they were talking about all sorts of crazy numbers. The fact of the matter is, they were only actually paying a third of that. Mereimar Magbe Shvacha. Mereimar, however, would accept at face value. Whatever it said was what he collected. Much easier. Just go based on what's written. Oh my gosh. Ravina says the Mereimar Vatani Lichpol BavaMetzia. But what about the Brisa that talks about doubling it and only collecting half? Lokasha the Konimine had lo Konimine. Well, it depends. Even in a place where the minig was to double the amount, if they made a kinyan, however, made it official that it was going to be the double amount, well then it's the double amount. If they didn't make a kinyan on it, then it's understood to be half. Ravina mashbach uchsiv levarte. So Ravina doubled the amount for his daughter. Amule nikne mines. They said to Ravina, okay, let's make it official. Let's make a kinyan. Nikne mine demar. Amulu, look. Look, if I'm making a kinyan on it, then there's no way that I'm doing this doubling thing. If I'm going to double it, then there's no way that I'm making a kinyan on it. I'm doing it to be fancy, but I don't actually plan to pay the double. I only plan to pay 50%. I'm not making a kinyan. If you want me to make a kinyan, I'm only committing half the amount, and it's not going to be as fun for the people. There was a guy who was shchiv mir, was on his deathbed, and he says, look, give 400 zuz for my daughter for her dowry. Zuzi levaiti b'chsubas and ksuba. So Shalach Rav Acha brei Rav Avi lekami Rav Ashi. So Rav Acha Rav Avi sends to Rav Ashi. Arba mea diinun tamne mea or arba mea zuze diinun mosin. That when he says 400, this was a place where the minig was to do this doubling shtick. So the question is, when he says 400, does that mean that we write in the ksuba 800 because he actually wants to pay 400, or do we write 400 and he actually wants to pay 200? And what do we do? Well, why don't you just write the actual amount? Amr of Ashi says, Rav Ashi chazinon. Well, we see. I Amr havula. If he says give it, if he said give it to her, arba mea zuze diinun tamne mea. Well, then he means give her 400 zuz. So you write in 800. I Amr ksovula. If he said write it, well then arba mea zuze. So it means write 400 zuz, but diinun mosin, but in fact the actual collected amount is going to be 200. Those who say Amr Vashi Chazinon, we see Amr lich subasa arba mea zuze diinun tamne mea. If he says for the ksuba, I guess, so then it's 400, like that's the actual amount that he wants to pay. But if he says in the ksuba arba mea zuze diinun mosin, then it just means write to 400 in the ksuba, but really we're talking about 200 veloi. That's not the case. It doesn't matter if he says lichsubasa or bichsubasa. Arba mea zuze diinun mosin ad amr havu la stama. That no lichsubasa bichsubasa, no difference. If he says 400, it means 400. You write 400, but you actually give 200, unless he says havula, unless he says give it to her. If he says give her 400. Well, then you give her 400. How gav the couple ara michabre? Okay, Ruvain accepted, right? Sharecropped his field from Shimon. Omar, and Reuben says to Shimon, "Imovarna law. If I leave it fallow, if I don't work it, and it's a sharecropping agreement, which means if I don't do any work, then nobody gets anything because it's percentage based." 50% of 0, if that was the arrangement, 50%. If 50% of 0 is 0. So if I slack off, Yoivna loch alpha zuzi, I'll give you 1,000 zuz. Ooh, wow. That's a lot. That's way more than Shimon would have gotten otherwise. But Reuven says, look, if I slack off, I'll make it up to you, but good. So Ovir Tilsa. So what happened in the end was he didn't leave the field fallow, but he didn't exactly farm, out of self. He farmed 2/3 of the field. 1/3 of the field was left fallow. So now what? So Amin Ardoi, so now the Nardain said, Dino, Dioivle, Tlos Mea, Vitlosim Vitlasa, Vitilsa. So the Nardain said, well, if he would have left it entirely fallow, he had committed to 1,000 dinars. Well, since he left it 1/3 fallow, he should be liable to 333 1/3 dinars. Rava Amar says, Rava asmachti ve'asmachta lo kanya. Rava says that is an asmachta. That's a exaggeration. And asmachta is not konet, right? 1,000 zuz is an exorbitant amount, right? He said that because he didn't actually plan to leave it fallow. But why is this any different than our Mishnah, which says where Reuven commits to saying that if I slack off and I leave the field fallow, so then I will pay you based on the projected amount. So asam lo kagozim, kevin de ka'amar milsa di yaserta guzme ba'amu de kagozim. The difference is that in our Mishnah, he was being practical. He was saying, look, if I don't work the field, well then I'll pay you what you could have expected to have received from the field. Like I'll own that. I'll take responsibility for that. Over here, he was going over the top, right? He was saying 1,000 zuz. 1,000 zuz is a lot. I think my understanding is, right? We had talked about at one point. We had talked about a scenario where like a person was like saving up for 1,000 zuz and maybe like paid only 200, and then they had to make up the other. It was like 1,000 zuz seems to be like the kind of thing that you didn't necessarily have readily available. It's a lot of money, apparently. So therefore that was an asmachta, and therefore an asmachta lo kanya according to Rav, and therefore he's not. We don't hold him to that 1,000 zuz piece at all. Okay, let me swap the video. How Gavir the Kabil Ira the Sumsme. Interesting. So Ruvain is sharecropping a field for sesame seeds. Now the thing is, sesame seeds sell for more than wheat. So there's an interesting thing. So basically you could sell sesame seeds at a higher price than you would sell wheat. But they make a bigger impact on the field. Like it's not as it's more intensive on the field. I don't exactly know what that means. Maybe it damages the field. Let's say again, I'm not a farmer, but it damages the field somehow. Like you have to work into the cheshbon that it's not. You're gonna have to work into the cheshbon that the field's gonna have to work hard, and somehow that's gonna translate in some way to like some kind of a loss for Shimon, right? And so on the one hand, he can make more money from the sesame seeds. On the other hand, he's also there's a cost involved in that, which is that the field takes a bit of a toll. Fine. So Reuven was sharecropping Shimon's field for sunflowers. No, please, no sunflower seeds. No sunflower seeds. Please, sesame seeds. I'm a much bigger fan of tchina than I am of sesame seeds. All right, I eat a lot of tchina. Sesame seeds are that's from sesame seeds. Sunflower seeds, though, are not my thing. Okay. How gathered the kabil ale the kabil ara the sumsme. So Reuven accepted, right? Was sharecropping Shimon's land for sesame seeds. That was the agreement, right? That's what they said. Okay, the plan was that Reuven was going to grow sesame seeds, and they were going to sell them and make a lot of money. It's going to be gavaldik. Zarachite. In the end, though, Reuven planted wheat. Now, again, wheat, it doesn't make as much money at the market as sesame seeds, but it doesn't damage the field as much. Abdechite kesumsme, but a gavaldik thing happened. Taka, that year, the wheat crops were selling at the same price as the sesame crops. So basically, they ended up making the same amount of money as if he would have planted sesame, and Shimon gains from the fact that there was less damage to his field. So Sover of Kahana, Lemema of Kahana figured, well, Reuven could renegotiate. Reuven could say to Shimon, look, you ended up making the same amount of money that you expected to make, and I saved you some money in terms of less damage to the field, so I would like to, take that off of the amount that I owe you, right? You expected certain damage to your field, which I avoided, so I would like to kind of that to be made up to me, in that I get more of a percentage. So Sover of Kahana, so if Kahana thought to say that is perfectly understandable, perfectly reasonable. Rav Ashi, Rav Kahana says, Rav Ashi, Rav Kahana, Amri Inche, Kochasho, Ara, Velodilichosh, Mara. Rav Ashi says, look, at the end of the day, what people care about is cash, right? At the end of the day, people want money. They don't really care about the field, right? Meaning, yeah, it's true in the long term, the wheat wasn't as damaging to the field as the sesame was, but in terms of like the trade-off, would Shimon rather get the money or like get less money in exchange for like the field thing? It's like, no, people want money. Don't say, well, your field is less damaged. So I don't care. I'll deal with the damage. Like I guess if it would have like been up to him, I guess. I guess the argument to say like, look, I saved you damage from your field. It's like, yeah, I don't care. Like I want money. Like I'd rather just get the money. All right. Right. Meaning like if like, he can't do anything. He can't feed his family with like less damage to the field. Right. Meaning, they had made up that he was going to sell sesame seeds. He ended up selling wheat. They ended up making the same amount of money as with the sesame seeds, but now he wants to say, okay, but now I want to pay you less because I did less damage to your field. It's like, look, I was expecting to make a certain amount of money, like that's what I want to make. Okay, fine. So Gabra the Kabil Ara Lesumseme. Okay, so there was a fellow who he was going to sharecrop the he was going to plant sesame. Zarachite, but he planted wheat. Abdechite tfei min tzumsmei. A gewaldige thing happened, and that year the wheat was actually a bigger money maker than the sesame seeds. So Ravina lemeimar yoiv le shvacha lebene bene. So Ravina thought to say that Ruvain would be entitled to the sort of that extra amount, right? Meaning Shimon was expected, right? The expectation was that Shimon was going to be receiving the value of the sesame seeds. Turned out, Ruvain, didn't go with the script. He planted wheat, which ended up being a bigger money maker, but Shimon was only really expecting the sesame value, so all the additional value should go to Ruvain. So Amarle Rav Achim Idifti Ravina, says Rav Achim Idifti Ravina, Atu Hu Ashbach Arlo Ashbacha. What is the increase in all his doing? I mean, the field also played a role in that increase, and therefore Shimon also has a right to that value as well. Chevre, the rest of today's daf is going to be Heter Iska. Heter Iska, remember from Ezu Uneshech? Okay, here we go. Amin Ardoi, the Nardaeans said, Hay Iska, in Iska, Palga Milveu Falga Pikodon. Remember that? Whew. Okay, Shimon and Ruvain going to business together. Shimon's the investor, Ruvain's the guy. Now Shimon provides all the merchandise. I don't know, they're selling, what are they selling? Sesame seeds. Selling sesame, they're selling trina. They're selling, what are they selling? They're selling cucumbers. So, what are they selling? They're selling clothing. That's good. It's not perishable. They're selling clothing. Clothing. Why not? Yeah, that's good. Clothing. All right. Yeah, they're selling clothing. So they're selling clothing. So Shimon, the investor, provides all of the clothing. Okay. Now remember, Reuven's going to go and he's going to sell it. Now Reuven's going to go and he's going to sell it, right? So $1,000 worth of clothing. Reuven's going to sell it for $2,000, and Shimon's going to make back his investment. They'll split the extra $1,000, 50-50. So on an investment of $1,000, Shimon's going to make $500. He's going to get back $1,500. He's going to make $500. Now the question, of course, is how do you structure the partnership? What's the deal with the $1,000 investment? What happens if Reuven loses all of the clothing? So what happens if Reuven loses his shirt? So if it's a loan and Reuven would have to pay back Shimon entirely for the $1,000, well then that's ribis, because Shimon's basically loaning Reuven $1,000 and getting back $1,500. Shimon's loaning Reuven $1,000 and getting back $1,500. That's a problem. A different alternative is that Shimon can accept all of the responsibility for it, in which case it's not a loan at all, and Reuven's just selling the merchandise for Shimon, and then if it all gets lost, so then Shimon loses it entirely. Another way to structure it would be half a deposit and half a loan. So of the $1,000 worth of clothing, this is more of the Heter Iska kind of stuff. Half of the $1,000 worth of clothing is a deposit that Shimon is depositing with Reuven, which means that if Reuven loses it, it's a loss to Shimon. But the other half is considered a loan, and therefore if Reuven loses all of the clothing, so Shimon would lose half, the half that was deposited with Reuven, but the other half he would be entitled to be paid back from Reuven because it was a loan. And then when Reuven goes and sells all of it for $2,000 and there's $1,000 profit, so $500 of it goes back to Shimon because that was the amount of his, relative to his deposit. And then the other half, Reuven can keep. Now there was still the question of what about the fact that Reuven is doing the work? Because if basically Reuven's getting paid, if Reuven's getting paid back his initial investment, the loan is being paid back, meaning he had initially laid out $1,000 and then they sold it for $2,000. He's getting paid back his $1,000. Right now, 500 of it was a deposit, but the other 500, he's being repaid back for a loan. Plus, Reuven's doing all the work, and that would be considered interest. Anyways, we're going to get into that a little bit towards in another few lines. But anyways, for now we're not really getting into that. So now, anyways, so Amin Ardai, the Nardai said, so hi Iska, so this business geschäft, Palga Milve or Falga Pikadon, it's 50% the loan, 50% a deposit. Over Rabbanon Milsa Denichale Lelova Venichale Lemalve, and the rabbis kind of made this construct, made this a deal so that you can do business, right? So that it's convenient to do business. Hashda Aminon Palga Milve, but now that we say that half of it is considered a loan to Reuven, and if it gets lost, Reuven needs to repay it. It's simply a loan. Well, if Reuven wants to, just go and drink beer instead of selling it, he can. Whatever, he just has to return the principal, right? It's a loan, he has to return it. But if he decides that, he doesn't want to do the work, so he could do that. So Rava Amar says, Rava Lachi Karu Le Iska to Amar Le Ki Ahibna Lach Le Iasuke Be V'Lo Mishte Be Shechra. Rava says, no, Reuven, this isn't just a regular loan that Reuven can do whatever he wants with. Shimon gave that money to him, yes, as a loan that he's committing to, that has to be paid back. But Shimon gave it to Reuven to do business with it. And the reason why that's important also is because Shimon tied his own fortunes together with Reuven. Right? Shimon's laying out the money, expecting that Reuven's going to do business with it, and they're going to make a profit. If Reuven's going to take his share and just spend it on alcohol, and Shimon doesn't really have that expectation that Reuven's really so invested in the business that he's really going to try to make as much of a profit as possible. So Shimon says, look, no, I didn't give you money to go drink beer with it. I gave you money to do business so that we could, both make a healthy profit. So, fine. Amar Vidi Baravin says, Vidi Baravin ve'emes, and what if Reuven dies? So Shimon had given all this clothing, had supplied all of the clothing, $1,000 worth of clothing for Reuven to do business with. Reuven now dies. So half of it was a deposit, so of course that goes back to Shimon, but the other half was a loan. Normally we say that a loan is not collectible from metaltlin, it's only collectible from nechasim mishubadim. So Mervidi Baravin, ve'emes, if Reuven dies, nice and metaltlin, eitz albanim. Well, the clothing is simply metaltlin, and Shimon cannot collect from the metaltlin. You can't get that clothing back. Rav Amar says, Rav Lachi Karu Le Iska. No, this is why it's called an Iska. It's called business, right? The im mace, that if Reuven now dies, lo yaisim metaltlin. It's not going to just become regular metaltlin that can't be collected from eitz albanim by his kids. No, it's right. Part of the thing is that if there was there were like when Shimon provides this clothing, this clothing for Reuven to do business with, there's kind of like understandings there that the point was to make a return on investment and to get back that principal amount, and and therefore if Reuven dies, that needs to be returned to Shimon, as opposed to like a loan, right? If Shimon simply lends Reuven $1,000, well, that's meant to be spent, right? That isn't meant to be returned, and if anything, there's like nechasim mishubadim, there's property that can be collected from, right? There's not an assumption to be collected from metalton, but over here, Davka, this is what he's, there's no nechasim mishubadim over here. He's giving this merchandise to be sold, and if he dies, that merchandise needs to go back to Shimon, so that he can continue doing business with it. Rava says, Rava chad isko v'trei shtar pseida de malve trei iske v'chad shtar pseida de love. Okay, so this gets back to the what was it called? The shtarder of Elish. Do you remember that? Basically, getting back to what I had mentioned a few minutes ago, which is that when we say that this merchandise is considered 50% deposit and 50% loan, well then when Reuven pays back that loan to Shimon, What about the fact that Reuven's also doing all the legwork? That's like added value that Shimon's receiving, so it's like interest. So how do you avoid that? So one way to avoid it is that, well, if Shimon says that we're splitting the risk 50-50, so if all the merchandise gets lost, so we each have to accept 50% of the loss, well then Shimon would accept only 1/3 of the profits. Reuven would get 2/3 of the profits, and that extra, amount that he's receiving is payment for, is in exchange for him doing all the work, right? So therefore it's not interest because Shimon is paying it for doing that work. A different option was that Shimon can accept 2/3 of the risk. Okay, so if it gets lost, Shimon will be responsible for 2/3 of the loss. But they split the profits 50-50. So we're assuming now that they're splitting the risk 50-50, and that the profits 2/3 will go to Reuven, 1/3 will go to Shimon. So what the Gemara is saying is, let's say Shimon gave Reuven two packages of clothing to sell. Each one was worth $50. Okay, Shimon gives to Reuven 2 packages of clothing to sell. Each one was worth $50. Now, so now what happens is one of the packages, Reuven manages to sell for $45 at a loss of $5. The other one he manages to sell for $65 at a gain of $15. So the net is a $10 gain, right? Meaning he lost 5 but gained 15, so it's a net of 10. But now if they were written as two, so now going back a second, so we had said that the way that the deal was structured was that in the event of loss, they would split the loss 50-50. In the event of gain, Reuven would get 2/3 of the gain, Shimon would get 1/3 of it. So if they write 2 separate contracts, well then Shimon, the investor, is going to lose out. He's going to make less money. How come? Well, if there were 2 separate contracts, well then we have to treat them separately. So the first package of $50 was only sold for $45 at a $5 loss, which they split 50-50. So each one is down $2.50. Now this other package was sold at a gain of $15, of which Reuven gets 2/3 of that, which is $10, which means that he's up $7.50, and Shimon only gets 1/3 of that, which is $5, but he also had to swallow a $2.50 loss, so he only walks away with $2.50. Whereas if there was only one contract, well then it's all together, and we say, okay, well there was a net gain of 10, right? I mean, if it's all one contract, okay, fine. So one of the packages was sold for 45, but the other one was sold for 65. So 45 and 65 is 110. So on an investment of $100, the Geschäft made $10, which they split. Shimon gets 2/3, Reuven gets 1/3, which would mean that Reuven gets 2/3, Shimon gets 1/3. So 1/3 of 10 is 3.3. So that way, right, Shimon's making $3.3, but the first way, if it was 2 separate contracts, then he would only make $2.50. So Amarava says, so if you have one iska of a trei shtari, so if you have 2 separate documents, so Shimon, the investor, is going to lose. But trei iske b'chad shtari, but if there was only one document, so then Reuven's going to make less. Okay. If Reuven accepted an investment from Shimon and Reuven lost the investment, but then Reuven worked hard to make it back and get back on his feet so that he wouldn't lose the money for the Geschäft. And he didn't let Shimon know about any of this. He can't come back to Shimon later and say, hey, by the way, you should know it wasn't so simple. I had lost initially and then I had made it back. Can we kind of split the loss? Now the thing is, the loss Shimon accepted to split 50-50, whereas any gains he would only get a third of, which means that if Shimon accepts the initial loss, then he's going to make less, at the end of the day. So we're saying lo matzi amarle dari mehech pseida. Reuven cannot say to Shimon, hey Shimon, can we split this the initial loss? Ba'adai with me, mishum da amarle, because Shimon will say to Reuven, lahachi tarachta the mal yusei. Look, the reason why you worked your butt off to make it back is because you didn't want to get a reputation as somebody who accepts other people's money and loses it, and therefore that was this is your thing, the loss, and then making it back up. You never consulted me about it. You didn't tell me about it. That's kind of your thing. I'm not splitting the initial loss with you. From Ravan says Rava, and he betrayed these two people, the Abdei Iska Ba'adei Dadi, these two. So basically there was Reuven, Shimon was the investor, Reuven and Levi were partners in the business. V'ravach, and they did very well. And then one of them says to the other one, okay, well, we did well, let's just quit while we're ahead. Taliflog, let's just quit while we're ahead and let's divide it up. The other one says, no, nirvach tvei, I want to keep going, we can make more. So Dino udim akib, so he can do that, right? Meaning if Reuven says that, hey, let's just quit while we're ahead, and Levi says, no, we're still in business. Like, I want to go weiter because, the repayment wasn't, Shimon wasn't expecting to get repaid yet. So it's like, let's go weiter. So he has the right to do so, right? It wasn't time to disband the business. So Shimon can say, no, I want us to keep on doing business. Habli palgo de revacha. Now, if Reuven says to Levi, well, at least give me my half of the profits, Omar le, Shimon can say to Levi, Ravcho l'karna mishtabed. No, all of the profits are kind of, we keep in the business, and it's mishuba to the principal, meaning that if we end up losing the principal, at least we still have the profits that we can kind of, use to make it back. So, Kilu, we don't want to pull money out of the business right now. And if Reuven says to Shimon, well, why don't we just divide everything up. Divide up the initial principal, divide up the gains, you'll get exactly 50%, and I'll get exactly 50%. So Amarle, so Shimon says to Reuven, Iskal Adadi Meshubad. No, it's all one business. There's no, two halves, and like you'll take your half, I'll take my half, and then I'll keep doing business and you won't. No, it's all one business, and we're not dividing it up. And if Reuven offers to Shimon, like, well, why don't we divide it up, and how about this? I'll guarantee you that if you end up losing money and now you're kind of stuck and you were depending on that extra money to be able to make up for it, I'll invest money into the business to make up for it. So he says, no, two people have better luck than one person. I want, look, we went into business together. We have all this money together. We're going to continue working together. We're not dividing things up. I don't want to go out on my own now, and we're going to keep on doing business together until the time is up. All right, that was Daf Kuf Daled of Masechet BavaMetzia. Hope you enjoy. Peace out.